This video is made for entertainment purposes only. They say a man is defined by his rituals. The things he does when no one's watching. The promises he keeps long after everyone else has forgotten why they mattered. For Samuel Hatcher, it was always about the pies. Every Sunday evening, without fail, from the first snow of November to the final melt of March, the old rancher would bundle up in his worn Carhartt jacket, grab whatever his late wife Martha had baked that week, usually apple, sometimes huckleberry if the season was right, and trudge through knee-deep powder to the ancient cedar stump at the northern boundary of his property. He'd set the pie down carefully, brush the snow off the flat-top surface that time and weather had smoothed to near perfection, and add whatever venison scraps he'd trimmed that week. Then he'd step back, tip his hat to the darkening tree lean, and walk home without looking back. Never once did he see what took them. But every Monday morning, for 32 years, that stump was empty. Clean. Not even crumbs remaining. This is the story of what happened when Samuel Hatcher couldn't make that walk anymore. And what came out of the forest in return. To understand what happened in January of 2022, you need to understand 1990. Samuel Hatcher wasn't always a believer. He was a practical man, a third-generation cattle rancher in the Bitterroot Mountains of western Montana, where the forests run so deep and silent that entire valleys exist that haven't seen human footprints in decades. His spread, the Broken Pine Ranch, sat at the end of a deteriorating county road, 23 miles from the nearest town of Darby, population 400 and change. He'd married Martha Reeves in 1962, and together they'd built something solid. No children. That particular heartbreak had come early and often. But they had each other, 2,000 acres of timber and meadow, a modest herd of black Angus, and a love that ran as deep as the taproots of the old-growth ponderosa pines surrounding their land. Martha was the dreamer. Samuel was the realist. It worked. In the autumn of 1990, Martha started talking about the woods differently. She'd always loved the forest, would spend hours walking the game trails with her sketchbook, drawing the elk and the whiskey jacks and the light falling through the canopy. But that fall, something shifted. "There's something watching," she told Samuel one evening over dinner. "Not dangerous. Just aware." Samuel had smiled and patted her hand. "Mountain lions'll do that. Makes your neck hairs stand up." "No," she shook her head, insistent. "This is different. Bigger. Older." He didn't argue. Martha wasn't prone to flights of fancy. If she felt something, she felt it true. 3 weeks later, she started baking extra pies. "What's this for?" Samuel had asked, watching her wrap a second apple pie in wax paper. "For the forest," Martha said simply, as if that explained everything. Samuel raised an eyebrow but said nothing. 30 years of marriage had taught him when to let mysteries be mysteries. That first Sunday in November, Martha walked out to the old cedar stump herself. Samuel watched from the porch, coffee mug steaming in the cold mountain air, as his wife placed the pie down with a kind of reverence usually reserved for church altars. She stood there for a long moment, her breath misting, then turned and walked back. "Did you see anything?" Samuel asked. Martha smiled. "I felt gratitude." He thought she was being poetic. Martha was like that sometimes, speaking in feelings instead of facts. But Monday morning, the pie was gone. No plate, no tin. Just gone. And in the fresh snow around the stump, there were impressions. Not tracks, exactly. Too unclear, too deliberately smudged. But impressions nonetheless. Large ones. Bear, Samuel thought. Had to be. But bears hibernate. And it was already November. The weeks became months. Every Sunday, Martha would bake her offering. Every Monday, it would be gone. Samuel noticed the pattern but didn't comment. This was Martha's ritual, Martha's communion with whatever wild thing prowled the northern timber. Then came February of 1991. A brutal cold snap descended, 30 below for 6 straight nights, the kind of cold that splits tree trunks and freezes diesel fuel solid. Samuel lost 3 calves despite his best efforts. The world became a study in survival, not sentiment. But Martha still baked her pie. "You can't go out there," Samuel said, watching the thermometer. "Not in this. Whatever's out there will understand." Martha just smiled that knowing smile and bundled up anyway. Samuel followed her, couldn't help himself. They walked together through snow that squeaked like styrofoam underfoot, their breath crystallizing instantly. When they reached the stump, Martha placed the pie and added a thick piece of venison backstrap Samuel had been saving. "For the cold," she whispered. 3 days later, they found a gift. Samuel discovered it first, a bundle of something left on the split-rail fence nearest the stump. At first, he thought it was just forest debris, branches blown by wind. But when he got closer, his breath caught. It was a carefully constructed bundle of pine boughs, woven together with impossible precision, no twine or binding visible. Tucked inside were 2 things: a massive elk antler, still in velvet, impossibly fresh for February, and a cluster of strange, twisted roots he didn't recognize. Knobby, dark, smelling of deep earth and something medicinal he couldn't name. "Martha," he called. She came. She saw. And she smiled like she'd just received a letter from an old friend. "It's saying thank you," she said. "It?" Samuel asked. "What it?" Martha just squeezed his hand. "The forest keeps its own counsel, Sam. Maybe we're not meant to see everything. Maybe some things live better in the peripheral." From that day forward, it became their ritual together. Every Sunday, they'd make the walk. And occasionally, not every week, but often enough, there would be gifts. A perfect hawk feather. A chunk of amber with an ancient insect preserved inside. Once, a stone carved with markings neither of them recognized, smooth and deliberate. Whatever was out there, it was intelligent. It was deliberate. And it was grateful. Samuel stopped calling it a bear. Cancer came for Martha in 2003. Pancreatic. Fast and merciless. She fought for 11 months, endured the surgeries and the poison they pumped through her veins, but the end was written before it began. In her final weeks, when she was too weak to leave the bed they'd shared for 41 years, she made Samuel promise. "Keep the ritual," she whispered, her hand paper-thin in his. "Don't let it end. Promise me." "I promise," Samuel said, his voice breaking. "Every Sunday. Every single Sunday." She died on a Tuesday in October, when the aspens were burning gold and the first snow was threatening. Samuel buried her in the family plot on the eastern ridge, under a granite marker he'd carved himself. The whole county turned out, 400 people who loved Martha Reeveshatcher for her kindness, her art, her gentle way of making everyone feel seen. That Sunday, Samuel baked a pie for the first time in his life. It was lopsided and the crust was tough, but he made it. He walked to the stump alone, placed it down, and stood there as the sun set behind the mountains. "She wanted me to keep this up," he said to the darkening forest. "So I'm keeping it up. I don't know what you are. Don't know if you're real or if I'm just a crazy old widower talking to trees. But Martha believed. So I'm believing too." He waited. Nothing moved. Nothing answered. But Monday morning, the pie was gone. And on the stump, arranged in a careful circle, were 7 perfect white stones, each one smooth as river rock, each one warm to the touch despite the frost. Samuel carried them home and placed them on Martha's side of the dresser. They stayed warm for 3 days. He never missed a Sunday after that. 19 years is a long time to keep a promise to a ghost. Samuel aged the way mountain men age, slowly, stubbornly, like weathered timber that refuses to rot. His joints complained. His back protested every morning. The ranch shrank as he sold off parcels he could no longer manage, keeping just the core 100 acres around the homestead and the northern timber where the stump stood. He hired help when he needed it, young men from town who needed work and didn't ask too many questions about the Sunday evening walks the old man took with a pie box under his arm. Most didn't last. Ranch work is hard, and Samuel's standards were exacting. But a few stuck around. Good men. Quiet men. The kind who understood that some things don't need explaining. In 2019, Samuel hired Marcus Webb. Marcus was different. Half Salish on his mother's side, raised on the Flathead Reservation before life took him through the usual spiral of bad choices and hard lessons. He'd found sobriety at 40, found purpose at 42, and found his way to Samuel's ranch at 44, lean, capable, and possessed of the kind of quiet competence that Samuel respected. More importantly, Marcus believed in things. The first time he saw Samuel heading out with a pie on a Sunday evening, Marcus didn't laugh or ask questions. He just nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "My grandmother did something similar," Marcus said, chopping wood for the stove. "Left tobacco and venison at the old places. Said the forest had elders, same as people. Said respect goes both ways." Samuel stopped mid-step, turned. "Your grandmother ever get anything back?" Marcus smiled. "Healing. Protection. Once, when she was lost as a girl, something led her home. Big footprints in the snow. No one believed her except the old ones." "You believe her?" "I believe there's more in these mountains than biology textbooks account for," Marcus said. "I believe respect costs nothing and means everything. And I believe some debts run deeper than what we can see." From that moment, Samuel and Marcus had an understanding. January 18th, 2022. A Tuesday. Samuel woke at his usual 5 a.m., made his coffee, and felt the left side of his body stop responding. No pain. No drama. Just a sudden, terrible absence. His arm hanging useless, his leg dragging, his face sagging like melted wax. He managed to hit the floor before losing consciousness. Marcus found him 20 minutes later, pale and barely breathing in the pre-dawn dark. No cell service this far out. The landline was in the kitchen, 10 feet away, might as well have been 10 miles. Marcus half-carried, half-dragged the old rancher to the truck and drove like hell down the mountain road, through the dark timber, toward Darby and the little clinic that served as the valley's only medical facility. Dr. Sarah Chen, young, competent, perpetually exhausted from covering 1,000 square miles of rural Montana, met them at the door. One look told her everything. "Massive ischemic stroke," she said, starting in 4 with practiced efficiency. "We need to get him to Missoula. Now." But the weather had other plans. The storm that had been threatening all week finally arrived, a howling, blinding whiteout that shut down Highway 93 and grounded the medical helicopter. Samuel lay in the clinic's single-patient room, stable but fading, while the snow piled higher and the hours crawled past. "He needs a neurologist," Dr. Chen told Marcus. "He needs a hospital with imaging and specialists. He needs things I can't give him here." "How long does he have?" Marcus asked. "If the clot moves, hours. If it stays put, maybe days. Maybe longer. Strokes are unpredictable. His age isn't helping." Marcus stood at the window, watching the snow erase the world. "He's tougher than he looks." "He's 84 years old," Dr. Chen said gently. "Tough only goes so far." The storm raged for 3 days. In that time, Samuel drifted in and out of consciousness, his mind swimming through decades of memory. Martha's laugh, the first calf born on the ranch, the weight of the rifle in his hands the day he'd had to put down his favorite horse, the smell of fresh-baked pie crust, the sound of wind through pine boughs. Time became liquid, meaningless. Dr. Chen managed to stabilize him enough to move him back to the ranch on Friday. The clinic needed the bed, and there was nothing more she could do that couldn't be done in his own home. She set up a hospital bed in the living room, showed Marcus how to monitor vitals, how to administer the blood thinners and anticoagulants, how to recognize the signs of another stroke. "Keep him comfortable," she said, her exhaustion evident. "Talk to him. Sometimes they can hear even when they can't respond. I'll check in when the road's clear." Marcus nodded, watching the old man's chest rise and fall with mechanical rhythm. Samuel looked smaller somehow, diminished, as if the stroke had stolen not just function but substance. That night, Marcus sat in Martha's old rocking chair, the one she'd used for quilting, and stared at the man who'd given him a second chance. The house creaked and settled around them. Outside, the wind howled through the eaves, and the temperature dropped to 15 below. And then Marcus remembered. Sunday had passed. No pie. No walk to the stump. 32 years of ritual. Broken. Marcus didn't know what lived in those woods. Didn't need to know. But he understood debt, understood obligation, understood that some promises transcend the person who makes them. They become part of the land itself. He stood, walked to the kitchen, and stared at the ancient oven that had produced thousands of pies over the decades. He'd never baked anything more complicated than cornbread in his life. "Hell with it," he muttered. He found Martha's recipe box, a battered tin decorated with faded flowers, and pulled out the card for apple pie. The handwriting was elegant, precise, with little notes in the margins. "Add a pinch of cardamom, it makes them curious, and always use cold butter, always." Marcus worked through the night. The first crust crumbled. The second was too tough. The third was passable. He followed the instructions like they were sacred text, peeling apples by lamplight, measuring spices, crimping edges the way the card directed. By 4 a.m., he had something that at least resembled a pie. It wasn't beautiful. Martha would have probably laughed at the lopsided lattice and uneven edges. But it was made with intention, and sometimes intention is enough. Sunday morning, Marcus bundled up and trudged through waist-deep snow toward the northern boundary. He'd never been to the stump before. That had been Samuel's private pilgrimage, but he knew the general direction. The forest was silent except for his breathing and the crunch of snow. No birds. No wind. Just vast, waiting silence. When he found the stump, he stopped. It was exactly as Samuel had described, an ancient cedar, long dead, cut off about 4 feet high, the top surface worn smooth by weather and time. But there was something else. Something Marcus felt rather than saw. A presence. An attention. Focused on him from the dark spaces between the trees. His grandmother's voice echoed in memory. "Respect costs nothing and means everything." Marcus placed the pie down carefully, adding the venison scraps he'd brought. Then he stepped back and spoke to the forest. "Samuel's sick," he said, his breath misting. "Had a stroke. Can't make the walk himself. But he wouldn't want the promise broken. So I'm here. I'll keep coming as long as he can't. That's all I know to do." The forest gave no answer. Marcus stood for another minute, feeling foolish and sincere in equal measure, then turned and walked back to the ranch. What Marcus didn't see, the massive shape that stood 30 yards back in the timber, concealed by shadow and pine boughs. It had been watching since Marcus arrived, evaluating, considering. It was old, far older than Samuel, older than the ranch, older than the county roads and the towns and most of the trees surrounding it. It remembered when these mountains had different names, spoken in different tongues by different peoples. It remembered Martha, the small, kind human who had started the offering 3 decades ago, who had drawn pictures in her book, who had sung while she walked, whose grief when she could no longer come had been palpable even from a distance. It had mourned her passing in its own way, leaving the warm stones as a gesture of shared sorrow. And it remembered Samuel, the male who had kept the promise, who had honored the dead by honoring the living, who had aged and endured and never faltered. The ritual had become part of the mountain's rhythm, expected as sunrise, reliable as seasons. Now the old human was broken. The creature could smell it, the sickness, the dying. And this new human, this younger male, was trying to bridge the gap. The pie was imperfect. The crust tough, the filling too sweet. But the intention was pure. The creature waited until Marcus was gone, then moved forward on feet that made no sound despite their size. It took the offering, consumed it slowly, thoughtfully. Then it stood at the stump for a long time, its breath steaming in the frigid air, making a decision. Debts run both ways. Monday morning, Marcus woke to something scratching at the back door. Not aggressive scratching. Not animal panic or predator hunger. Deliberate. Methodical. 3 scrapes, pause. 3 more scrapes, pause. He grabbed the rifle, more instinct than fear, and moved through the dark house. Samuel was still sleeping, his breathing ragged but steady. The scratching came again. Marcus flipped on the porch light and looked through the window. Nothing. Just snow and darkness and the wind moving through the pines. He opened the door carefully, rifle ready. On the porch railing, arranged with impossible precision, was a bundle. Marcus stepped out, the cold hitting him like a fist. The bundle was wrapped in what looked like woven cedar bark, tied with strips of something fibrous and strong. It was about the size of a football, and it radiated a smell that made his sinuses clear instantly. Deep earth, pine pitch, something medicinal and ancient. He picked it up. Heavy. Solid. The bark wrapping was still warm despite the sub-zero temperature. Marcus looked out at the forest. Nothing moved. But he felt it again. That presence, that attention, now withdrawing like a tide going out. "Thank you," he said to the darkness. He brought the bundle inside, set it on the kitchen table, and carefully unwrapped it. Inside were roots. Dozens of them, twisted and knobby, unlike anything he'd seen in 46 years of living in Montana. They were dark brown, almost black, with a texture like old leather. When he touched one, his fingers tingled. Marcus had no idea what they were. But his grandmother's voice spoke again in memory. "The forest provides. Trust what it offers." He filled a pot with water, added several of the roots, and set it to boil. The smell that filled the kitchen was overwhelming. Earth and medicine and something else, something that made his blood feel cleaner just breathing it. He let it steep for 20 minutes, strained it into a mug, and carried it to Samuel's bedside. The old man was awake. Barely. His good eye tracked Marcus's movement. "Found something," Marcus said quietly. "Left on the porch. I think it's for you." He helped Samuel sit up, supporting the old man's head, and carefully brought the mug to his lips. Samuel sipped, grimaced at the bitterness, but swallowed. Then again. And again. "From the forest," Marcus said. "From whatever you've been feeding all these years." Samuel's good eye widened slightly. Understanding, or maybe just hope. He drank the rest of the tea, then slipped back into sleep. The change wasn't immediate. Wasn't miraculous. But it was real. By Tuesday, Samuel could move his fingers on the affected hand. Not much. Just a twitch, a curl, but movement where there had been none. By Wednesday, he spoke his first word since the stroke, "More." Marcus brewed more tea, stronger this time, using more roots. The house smelled like a forest floor after rain, thick with life and growth and old knowledge. Samuel drank it 3 times a day, his color slowly returning, his breathing steadier. By Friday, he could sit up on his own. Dr. Chen arrived that afternoon, chains on her tires, disbelief on her face when she examined Samuel. She checked his vitals, tested his reflexes, took blood for analysis. "This doesn't make sense," she said, more to herself than to Marcus. "Stroke patients don't recover this fast. Especially not at his age, not with the severity of the initial event. His blood work shows. I don't even know how to explain this. His clotting factors are normalizing. The inflammation markers are dropping. It's like something is actively dissolving the damage." "He's been drinking tea," Marcus said carefully. "Something from the forest." Dr. Chen looked at him sharply. "What kind of tea?" Marcus showed her the roots. She picked one up, examined it, smelled it, and shook her head. "I don't know what this is," she admitted. "It's not anything in my pharmacology textbooks." "Where did you find it?" "It found us," Marcus said simply. Dr. Chen wanted samples. Wanted to send them to a university lab in Bozeman, wanted to analyze the compounds, wanted to understand the mechanism. Marcus gave her 3 roots, keeping the rest. Some things, he felt, weren't meant to be understood, just honored. By the second Sunday, Samuel could speak in halting sentences. His left side was still weak, still partially paralyzed, but the progress was undeniable. He was alive when he should have been dead, recovering when he should have been declining. Marcus sat with him in the evening, the house quiet except for the wood stove's crackle. "I couldn't make the walk," Samuel said slowly, each word an effort. "First time in 32 years. "I made it for you," Marcus said. "And I'll keep making it until you can do it yourself." Samuel's good hand reached out, gripped Marcus's with surprising strength. "It helped me, saved me. I know. Martha was right." Samuel's eyes filled with tears. All along, she knew. Something out there. Something old. Something good. "What do you think it is?" Marcus asked. Samuel was quiet for a long time, staring at the window where frost patterns bloomed like forest ferns. Guardian, he finally said. Keeper of the wild places. Martha called it the Old One. Said every forest has them, if you know how to listen. Said respect goes both ways. Your wife was a wise woman. Wiser than me. Samuel smiled, the expression crooked but genuine. I just kept the promise. Didn't even believe. Not really. Not until now. That night, Marcus helped Samuel to bed, tucked the quilts around him, and stood for a moment looking at the old rancher who'd given him work and dignity when no one else would. I'm taking a pie out tonight, Marcus said. Special one. Chocolate. Your wife's recipe said it was for celebration. Samuel nodded. Tell it, thank you. Tell it. Samuel Hatcher remembers. Samuel Hatcher is grateful. Marcus made the walk at midnight, under a sky so clear and cold the stars looked close enough to touch. The snow crunched beneath his boots, and his breath froze in his beard. He carried the chocolate pie, Martha's special recipe, the one with the note that said, only for important occasions, and a full venison tenderloin, the best cut from the last deer he'd processed. When he reached the stump, he placed both down with ceremony, then stood back. Samuel asked me to say thank you, Marcus spoke to the darkness. He's getting better because of what you gave. He remembers. He's grateful. And so am I. The forest was silent. But Marcus felt it, that presence, closer now, less cautious. He stood his ground, kept his breathing steady, and waited. Then he saw it. Not clearly. Not fully. Just an impression, a massive silhouette against the snow, maybe 15 yards back in the tree line. Tall. Impossibly tall. Shoulders broad as a door frame. Arms that hung past where human arms should end. And eyes. Eyes that caught the starlight and reflected it back, amber and ancient and utterly, completely aware. Marcus didn't run. Didn't shout. He'd grown up on stories of the old ones, the forest people, the Sasquatch his grandmother had spoken of in whispers. He'd always believed, somewhere deep where belief lives before it becomes thought. He slowly raised his hand, palm out. A gesture of peace, of recognition, of gratitude. The creature, the old one, the guardian, whatever name fit its vast and unknowable nature, stood motionless. Then, with a movement too graceful for something so large, it raised one massive hand in mirror gesture. They stood like that for a heartbeat, a breath, an eternity compressed into seconds. Two species, two worlds, acknowledging each other across the gulf of biology and time. Then the creature lowered its hand, took one step back, and dissolved into shadow and forest like it had never been there at all. Marcus stood alone at the stump, his heart hammering, his breath misting in the crystal air. He'd just seen what most people spend their lives denying exists. He'd been acknowledged, been seen, been accepted. He walked back to the ranch in a daze, his mind reeling, his soul somehow both shaken and settled. Samuel was awake when he returned, propped up in bed, that knowing look in his eyes. You saw it, the old man said. Not a question. I saw it, Marcus confirmed. Now you understand. Now I understand. February brought a thaw. The temperature climbed above freezing for the first time in 6 weeks, and the snow began its slow retreat. Meltwater dripped from the eaves, cut channels through the drifts, turned the county road into a ribbon of mud. The world exhaled after holding its breath through the deepest part of winter. Samuel improved with each passing day. The roots. Marcus kept them in a clay jar now, wrapped in cloth, stored in the coolest part of the pantry, continued to work their inexplicable medicine. Dr. Chen came twice more, each visit leaving her more baffled than the last. She'd sent samples to the university in Bozeman, to colleagues in Seattle, even to a specialist in ethnobotany in Vancouver who studied traditional indigenous medicines. No one could identify them. The chemical composition is unlike anything in the databases, Dr. Chen told them in early February, her laptop open on the kitchen table showing charts and molecular diagrams that meant nothing to Marcus or Samuel. There are compounds in here that look vaguely similar to anticoagulants found in leech saliva, but far more sophisticated. There are anti-inflammatory agents that make our best drugs look primitive. And there's something else, something my colleagues are calling a cellular regeneration catalyst, that shouldn't exist outside of stem cell research labs. Where did you say you found these again? She asked for the third time. Left on the porch, Marcus said, keeping his voice neutral. Gift from a neighbor. Dr. Chen looked at him, looked at Samuel, and closed her laptop with a sigh. Some neighbor. These roots could revolutionize stroke treatment, could save millions of lives. If we could synthesize them, if we could cultivate the plant they come from. No, Samuel said, his speech much clearer now, though still deliberate. Not for that. Mr. Hatcher, with all due respect, you're alive because of these. Other people deserve. Other people didn't keep the promise, Samuel interrupted, his good hand flat on the table. This isn't medicine you can bottle and sell. This is reciprocity. This is relationship. You take that away, you break something that can't be fixed. Dr. Chen stared at him, frustration and understanding warring on her face. Finally, she nodded. Your choice. But I'm keeping my samples. Maybe someday you'll change your mind. After she left, Marcus and Samuel sat in silence for a long time. She doesn't understand, Samuel said eventually. No, Marcus agreed. Most people wouldn't. Some gifts aren't meant to be replicated. They're meant to be received with humility, with gratitude. Samuel looked at his recovering hand, slowly opening and closing the fingers. Martha tried to tell me that. Took me 32 years and a stroke to really hear it. By mid-February, Samuel could walk with a cane. By the end of the month, he could manage without it for short distances. His speech was nearly normal, his mind sharp, his body determined to reclaim what the stroke had stolen. Marcus continued the Sunday ritual, but both men knew it was temporary. Samuel needed to make the walk himself. Needed to complete the circle. Not yet, Dr. Chen warned when Samuel mentioned it during her final visit. You're doing remarkably well, but that's still a significant hike through difficult terrain. Another month at least. But Samuel was a rancher, a man of the mountains, and patience had its limits. On the first Sunday of March, with the snow reduced to patches in the shadows and the first brave shoots of glacier lilies pushing through the mud, Samuel decided it was time. I'm going today, he told Marcus over breakfast. Doc Chen said. Doc Chen doesn't understand what this means, Samuel said quietly. I've been receiving help for 6 weeks. Healing because something from that forest chose to help me. I need to say thank you properly. Face to face, as much as that's possible. Marcus studied him. The old man's color was good, his movements steady, his eyes clear and determined. All right. But I'm walking with you. And I'm carrying the pie. Samuel smiled. Deal. They set out at 4 in the afternoon, giving themselves plenty of time before sunset. Marcus carried a fresh huckleberry pie. He'd gotten better at baking over the weeks, and this one would have made Martha proud, and a good portion of venison. Samuel moved slowly, using his cane more for balance than support, stopping occasionally to catch his breath. The forest was coming alive around them. Chickadees called in the branches. A squirrel scolded from a lightning-struck pine. Water ran beneath the ice in the creek beds, singing its ancient song of renewal. The air smelled of wet earth and pine sap and the green promise of spring. It took them 40 minutes to reach the stump, a journey that used to take Samuel 15. But they made it, both men breathing hard, both grinning like they'd just summited Everest. Marcus placed the pie and meat on the stump. Then he stepped back, giving Samuel space. The old rancher stood before the ancient cedar, one hand on his cane, the other reaching out to touch the worn surface where 3 decades of offerings had been placed. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes closed, his breathing steadying. I don't know if you can understand me, Samuel finally said, his voice carrying into the timber. Don't know if words mean anything to you. But I need to try. He paused, gathering thoughts, gathering emotion. 32 years ago, my wife started this. She felt you out here. Knew you were real when I still had doubts. She was always wiser than me that way. When she died, she made me promise to keep it going. And I did, not because I believed, not really, but because I loved her. Because keeping promises to the dead is how we honor them." Samuel's voice cracked slightly. Marcus stayed back, giving the old man his moment. But somewhere along the way, it became real for me too. Became more than just keeping Martha's memory alive. It became communion, I guess. Relationship. You took what we offered. You left gifts in return. We built something, you and I. Built trust across a divide that most people don't even believe exists. Samuel lowered his hand from the stump, gripped his cane with both hands. Then I got sick. Couldn't keep my end. Couldn't make the walk. And you. His voice broke completely now, tears running down his weathered face. You saved my life. You gave me medicine that doctors can't explain. You gave me more time. More springs. More chances to see the forest wake up and the calves born and the hawks riding the thermals over the ridge. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, unashamed of the tears. I don't have words big enough for that kind of gift. Don't have anything valuable enough to give back. Just pies and venison and an old man's gratitude. But I want you to know, I see you. I honor you. And I'll keep this promise as long as I'm breathing. That's all I have. That's all I am. But it's yours. The forest was utterly silent. Even the birds had gone quiet. Marcus felt the hair on his neck stand up, felt that presence he'd felt before, but stronger now. Closer. Samuel stood motionless, waiting, listening. Then, from the deep timber, came a sound. Not a roar. Not a scream. Something between a hum and a resonance, a vocalization that seemed to bypass ears entirely and speak directly to the chest, the bones, the ancient parts of the brain that remember when humans were prey and the forest was everything. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds, Marcus understood that he was hearing language. Not human language, but communication nonetheless. Acknowledgement. Acceptance. Gratitude returned. Samuel's face transformed. The tears came harder now, but he was smiling, radiating something that looked like peace and joy and relief all mixed together. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." The presence remained for another moment, palpable as weather, then slowly withdrew like a tide retreating. The forest came alive again, birds calling, wind moving, water running. The everyday world returning after a moment of something sacred. They walked back in silence, both men processing what had just occurred. The sun was setting behind the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed impossibly vivid. Samuel moved easier now, his cane barely touching the ground, as if the encounter had given him more than emotional relief. Back at the ranch, Marcus made coffee while Samuel lowered himself into Martha's rocking chair with a contented sigh. "I need to tell you something," Samuel said after a while. "Something Martha told me the week before she died. Something I've been carrying alone for 19 years. Marcus brought the coffee over, settled into the other chair. "She saw it once," Samuel continued, his voice quiet. "The old one. Not just glimpses or shadows. Full on, in broad daylight. It was summer of 2002, about a year before the cancer came. She'd been sketching up near the stump, and when she stood to leave, it was just there, 20 feet away, standing in the open." "What did she say it looked like?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. "Like a person, but not. 8 feet tall, maybe more. Covered in reddish-brown hair, but sparser than you'd think. She could see skin underneath, dark and weathered. Face more human than ape," she said. "Flat, with a prominent brow and eyes that were completely, terrifyingly intelligent. It was a female. Martha was sure of that. Said she could see wisdom there, and sorrow, and something else she couldn't name." Samuel sipped his coffee, lost in the memory. They stood there for almost 5 minutes, just looking at each other. Martha said she wasn't afraid. Said it felt like meeting someone from another country, another culture, not dangerous, just different. Eventually, the creature touched its chest, right over the heart, and then pointed at Martha. Then it turned and walked away. No hurry, no fear. Just left. Did she tell anyone else? Just me. Made me promise not to speak of it until after she was gone. Said people would think she was crazy, would come looking, would ruin everything. She understood that some things survive only in secret. Only in the margins. Marcus nodded slowly. Your wife was protecting it. Protecting them, Samuel corrected. Martha didn't think it was alone. Thought there were others, maybe a family group, living deep in the wilderness. She said the old one had the eyes of someone who'd seen too much death, too much loss. Someone who'd survived when others hadn't. Like an elder, Marcus said, thinking of his grandmother, thinking of the burden of being the last one who remembers. Exactly like an elder. Samuel set his coffee down. That's why Martha started the offerings. Not feeding, not charity. Respect. Acknowledgement. Seeing and being seen. She understood that recognition matters. That witness matters. Especially for those the world pretends don't exist. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell outside and the temperature dropped and the house settled around them. Spring came in full, then summer, then autumn again. Samuel continued to strengthen, defying every medical expectation. By June, he could work a full day. By August, he was riding again, checking fence lines from horseback, feeling the sun on his face and marveling at the simple gift of being alive. Every Sunday, without fail, he made the walk to the stump. Sometimes Marcus joined him. Sometimes he went alone. The offerings were always received. The gifts still came occasionally. Strange feathers, carved stones, once a perfectly preserved fossil of something ancient and nameless. Dr. Chen published a paper in a medical journal about unexplained stroke recovery in an elderly patient using unidentified botanical compounds. It created a minor stir in academic circles. She never revealed the patient's name or location, honoring Samuel's privacy. The university wanted the source of the roots. She told them they'd been exhausted, all gone, no way to get more. It was a lie, but a necessary one. Some secrets keep themselves. In September, Marcus was checking the northern fence line and found something that stopped him cold, a print in the soft mud near the creek. Massive. Definitely not bare. 5 toes, clearly defined. A heel strike that suggested bipedal gait. He measured it with his hand. 17 inches long, 7 wide. He told Samuel that evening. The old man just smiled. That's the youngster. Youngster. I think there are at least 3, Samuel said. The old one, that's the matriarch, the one Martha saw. Then a younger adult, maybe the old one's child. And a juvenile. I found smaller prints last spring, only about 12 inches. They're a family. Maybe the last one in these mountains. Maybe one of several. Don't know. Don't need to know. Does it ever scare you? Marcus asked. Knowing they're out there, knowing they're so close? Samuel considered the question seriously. No. Should it? They've had 32 years of opportunities to do harm and never once chose violence. They've only ever chosen reciprocity. That tells me everything I need to know about their character. You think they're people, don't you? Not animals. I think the line between people and animals is something we drew to make ourselves feel superior, Samuel said. I think consciousness comes in more forms than we're comfortable admitting. I think something can be a person without being human. And I think the old one is more person than half the humans I've met. November came around again, bringing snow and cold and the quiet closing down of the mountain year. Samuel was 85 now, healthy in a way that mystified everyone who knew his medical history. He moved like a man 20 years younger. Dr. Chen had stopped trying to explain it, had started simply calling it the Montana Miracle, and leaving it at that. The first Sunday of deep winter, Samuel baked Martha's apple pie recipe himself. He'd been practicing all year, and this one was perfect. Golden crust, filling with just the right amount of cinnamon and cardamom, the way his wife had made it 3 decades ago. He bundled up in his old Carhartt, grabbed the pie and a good portion of venison, and set out into the blue twilight. Marcus watched from the porch, coffee steaming, as the old man trudged through fresh snow toward the northern timber. Samuel reached the stump as full darkness settled in. He placed the offering with his usual care, stepped back, and spoke to the forest. 33 years now, he said. Funny how time works. How something that started as one woman's intuition becomes a life's purpose. How keeping a promise can become the thing that defines you. He paused, looking up at the stars appearing between the pine boughs. I'm 85 years old. Lived longer than I had any right to expect, thanks to you. Don't know how many more Sundays I've got in me, but I'll be here for every one I'm given. That's still my promise. Still my truth. The cold bit at his exposed skin, but Samuel didn't move. He stood in the presence the way he'd learned to stand, quiet, respectful, open. And then, for the second time in his life, Samuel Hatcher saw it clearly. The old one stepped from the shadows at the forest edge. Not hiding now. Not cautious. It stood fully visible in the starlight. Massive, imposing, impossibly real. Female, as Martha had said. Reddish-brown hair silvered with age. Face weathered and wise and unspeakably sad. Eyes that held the weight of being the last guardian of a dying species. Samuel didn't move. Barely breathed. The old one raised one massive hand and placed it over her chest, directly over her heart. Then she extended that same hand toward Samuel, palm out. The gesture Martha had described. Recognition. Respect. Gratitude. Samuel, tears freezing on his cheeks, mirrored the gesture. His hand over his heart, then extended toward her. Seeing and being seen. Honoring and being honored. They stood like that for a long moment. Man and myth, human and elder species, two survivors sharing the weight of persisting in a world that had no place left for either of them. Then the old one lowered her hand, gave a single nod, and turned. She walked back into the timber with fluid grace, and two smaller shapes materialized from the shadows to follow her. Family. Continuation. Hope against hope. Samuel stood alone at the stump, his heart full to breaking, understanding finally, truly understanding, what Martha had known all along. Some relationships transcend everything we think we know about the world. Some bonds are older than civilization, deeper than language, more true than any fact we can prove. And some promises aren't kept because we understand them. They're kept because keeping them makes us worthy of having made them in the first place. Samuel Hatcher lived 6 more years. He kept his Sunday ritual through all of them, never missing a week, walking to the stump in all weather and all seasons until the morning he simply didn't wake up. Marcus found him peaceful in his bed, a smile on his weathered face, Martha's recipe box on his nightstand open to the apple pie card. He was 91 years old. The doctors called it a minor miracle that he'd lived so long after such a severe stroke. Marcus called it what it was, a gift, freely given, gratefully received. Marcus buried him next to Martha on the eastern ridge, under the ponderosa pines, with a stone that read, Samuel Hatcher, 1937 to 2028. He kept his promises. And then Marcus faced a decision. The ranch was his now. Samuel had left it to him in a will that surprised no one who knew them both. 2 men who'd become brothers through mutual respect and shared mystery. The land, the cattle, the house where 2 people had loved each other, and one had kept that love alive through ritual and devotion. And the promise. The Sunday evening walks. The offerings. The relationship with something the world refused to acknowledge. That Sunday, Marcus baked a pie. It was easier now after years of practice. He made Samuel's favorite, apple with cardamom, and added extra venison. Then he trudged through March snow to the ancient cedar stump, placed the offering with ceremony, and spoke to the forest. Samuel's gone, he said simply. He kept the promise for 39 years. Now it's mine to keep. I don't know how many years I've got, but they're yours. Every Sunday. Every season. You have my word. The forest was silent. But Marcus felt it, that familiar presence, that attention, now tinged with something that might have been grief. Even the old ones mourn their friends. Marcus stood for a long moment, then placed his hand over his heart and extended it toward the darkness. The gesture Samuel had taught him. The gesture Martha had learned from the Old One herself. Recognition, respect, continuation. And somewhere deep in the timber, invisible in the shadows, something ancient and impossibly rare returned the gesture. An elder acknowledging a new guardian. A survivor recognizing another survivor. A promise passing from one generation to the next, as it had always been meant to. The pie disappeared that night. In its place, arranged with impossible care, were 3 stones, one large, one medium, one small, stacked in a cairn. A family marker. A memorial. A thank you that transcended species and spanned decades. Marcus carried them home and placed them with the others Samuel had collected over the years. 40 stones now, each one marking a moment of connection, each one warm with impossible heat for 3 days before cooling. Each one proof that some things survive in the margins. That respect builds bridges across divides we're told can't be crossed. That keeping promises, even when no one believes, even when no one sees, matters more than we can possibly understand. And every Sunday evening, in a remote valley in the Bitterroot Mountains, a man makes a walk through the forest carrying a pie and venison. Every Monday morning, the offering is gone. And twice a year, when the seasons change and the forest whispers its secrets, gifts appear on a weathered porch railing. Stones, feathers, roots, reminders. The Old One is still out there. Still watching. Still teaching those who are willing to learn that the world is bigger and stranger and more filled with grace than our small minds can comprehend. And somewhere, in whatever place the dead go to watch the living, Martha and Samuel Hatcher smile. Their legacy isn't land or money or things that rust and fade. Their legacy is relationship, is recognition, is the simple, profound truth that we are not alone, have never been alone, if we're brave enough to see. The ritual continues. The forest remembers. And every Sunday evening, without fail, a pie disappears from an ancient cedar stump, taken by hands the world pretends don't exist, eaten by a family that survives in the spaces between belief and proof. Some promises transcend the people who make them. Some debts are paid across generations. And some love, the deepest kind, is measured not in words or years, but in pies left on stumps in the wilderness, and the mysterious grace that returns in the darkness to claim them.